Sun's coming out.
Hi, everyone. I'm here with Bev Jo. She is a lesbian separatist, working class dyke, and obviously, if you've watched my channel for a while, I've reviewed a book that she contributed to called Dykes Loving Dykes, and just am here to have a strange conversation with her.
Aw.
Thank you for agreeing to speak with me, Bev.
Thank you, Terry. Aw.
Yeah, I guess I wanted to talk to you because you obviously have been through so much, and you know so much about the history of like feminism and lesbian separatism and all of it, and I feel like one thing I'm wanting to do with this project is to kind of give a voice to women, you know, in a different platform that they haven't had necessarily. So I really want to thank you for agreeing to talk with me today.
Thank you.
And yeah, I guess what I wanted to do is just have you start talking about kind of your life, because it's really fascinating. And yeah, I guess kind of talk about how you became political and like how that sort of happened and what kind of brought you to the politics you have.
Thank you. Sure. And thank you for doing this, because it's so important, since our history is being erased. Before we die, we're dead even. I mean, it's not just the men pretending they're women and pretending they're lesbians, and everybody else has more power than us, but even some of the lesbians who weren't in our movement and community are telling things that aren't true because they've heard these things that aren't true.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I was born in 1950 in the area near Cincinnati, Ohio, and grew up there till I was 15 and moved to California. And I was in a working class family, raised Catholic, and I was in love with other girls from my earliest memories. Then, I'm trying to think what then happened. I started to let, well, at least my best friend, at the time when I was 15, that I told her I was in love with her. And it's interesting because her response was very, I don't know, interesting in terms of what's happening now with losing public restrooms and identification with males, because I never identified as male. I didn't really like boys. My father seemed fine, but males mostly, they were these beings that were harassing the girls, hurting the girls, sexually assaulting animals. I didn't know they were sexually assaulting girls at that time, torturing and killing animals. I didn't like males, so I don't want to identify with them. I was in love with other girls, and I was a girl. But I also didn't go along with femininity, which is why I identify as butch now, that I was really pushed into that, and everything about it was wearing shoes that hurt, had to wear dresses to school, which meant being completely exposed to the cold and injured and when knocked down and being sexually harassed. So then when I was 15, this girl I was in love with, who was just so wonderful, and she was very wise about things. We would talk about all kinds of things, and she seemed to think more than most. But when I told her I was in love with her, at one point we were someplace out in public, and she was trying to say, you don't want to identify as this, do you? And she pointed to the male bathroom. Like if I was going to be in love with her, then I'd want to use the male bathroom. And I was like, no, but it really creeped me out. It made me feel even more unsafe to tell anybody I was in love with them. Years later when we talked, she said she was in love with me too, but she was too scared. So what she was doing at that time was very actively deciding she had to get interested in males, which she wasn't interested in, learn how to flirt with them, learn how to be with them, because she had this plan for the future, which is she wanted to be accepted as normal. She wanted to have a career with a high-paying job, which she got. She did it all, but she was miserable when I met her later. So then when I was 17, I kept falling in love with girls, and I thought, why don't I fall in love with someone I'm already really close with, like I had with Anne? So I did with Margaret. And Margaret fell in love with me too. So we became lovers. But I was away at my first year of college, but I came back every weekend to be with her. But she was living with her parents, who grew increasingly suspicious, and finally her mother found our letters. We were forbidden to see each other. And we kept meeting secretly and got found out again. So anyway, all this happened. This was 1968, 69. So before I knew anything about feminism or lesbian feminist community. So there's more of the story in there, but in 1970, I was in Berkeley and found lesbian feminists, and it was like a whole other world where we had lesbian space, which was women only. In the U.S., there was not much ever lesbian only. In other places, like Aotearoa, New Zealand, they had lesbian only space, taken for granted. It was like here, it was always more sold out, liberal, not wanting to upset the non-lesbians. They were always more important than the lesbians. But anyway, we still had our community that was very strong, and there were all these spaces. And at one point, there were bookstores, coffee houses, bars, and there were just weekly events or dances, concerts, and it was lesbian community. And it was incredible after growing up with no support at all about what it meant to be a lesbian, just being hated. If we were in the media at all, it was presented as just these horrifying, monstrous freaks. And it's interesting because now, as much as women can say, it's so hard to be a lesbian, they can't, they didn't know it existed. There have been beloved lesbians on television for years now. Mm-hmm. Lesbians are in the media. It's still odd. There are no butches that I can think of, genuine butches, ever shown. There'll be some grotesque caricature who's a femme playing a butch. Or butches are ridiculed, but generally that's forbidden. So, but still, we've got, Rachel Maddow, and in the U.S. we've got Ellen DeGeneres, and there are others, and there have been a few good films, but most of them are very head-oriented. The lesbians are making babies, one has to go off and get fucked by a man. There isn't a lot that we have that, interestingly, the men who say they're women have. They're throughout the media. They're in television shows, they're in films, there's shows completely arranged around them. They're side characters that are all like wonderful, beloved. It's like I don't remember any other group that's supposedly oppressed that got that kind of status. Mm-hmm. I mean, for a brief period of time, there were positive images of African descent people, but now they're being cast in these horrible racist roles throughout the media. I mean, there's some positive images, but there's horrifying images. There's nothing about the men who say they're women or lesbians that are presented as what they really are, which is violence level the same as other heterosexual men, because most are heterosexual men. Mm-hmm. A few are self-hating gay men. So it's really horrific how we're losing everything we had, including restrooms, public restrooms. Our last spaces, Michigan is gone. So I kind of went off on a tangent about all that, but yeah, I became a separatist in 1972 because I wanted to be just with lesbians, and separatism then meant primarily just being with lesbians, not even being around head women very much. Now, of course, politically, I believe we all choose who we love, that we're born to love other females. At a certain point, because of the rewards and the punishments, women choose to be heterosexual or bisexual, but clearly it's a choice because almost every lesbian was heterosexual at one point. Some go back, and clearly with bisexuals existing, it's a choice. But it's being used as this liberal con, really. The born this way theory was what the psychiatrist who hated us said before there was a feminist or gay movement, and now it's come back because the gay men pushed that in a plea to get equal rights, that we don't have a choice. Of course we have a choice. So,
yeah.
So many subjects. I'm jumping around from subject to subject, but
I think they're all interrelated quite a bit.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously, I agree with you about the fact that our sexual, what do you want to call it? I don't know. I hate the term orientation.
Yeah, I don't use it.
Or sexuality. And I hate even just making it just about sex, because it's not just about, like, sex. It's about, like, your life, who you love, who you are invested in.
Love
everything.
Yep.
Like, if you're not in a relationship, you're still a lesbian. If you're not if no one is interested in you, like, because you're a feminist pariah, like, you're still a lesbian.
Absolutely.
So I've been in some pretty awful, like, queer scenes where it's impossible to date. Like, you just can't. I'm not not going to subject myself to that, like, level of hatred and misogyny. But yeah, I mean, that was I think it's really important to talk about that, and I really want to talk to women about that subject as well, because I'm really amazed in this, like, I don't know if you can call it a resurgence of interest in feminism or whatever, but, like, it seems to me that more women, because of the internet, have more access to radical politics and radical ideas. I'm really confused why so many are still remaining heterosexual, other than I can only guess that it's a desire to maintain, like, that privilege and the identification that they don't want to let go of with privilege. Because I know I was bisexual and realized through feminism that was a choice I was making, and that I could make a better choice. And it just didn't make sense if I had these politics and really believed what I said I believed to have any sort of identification with men at all. Like, they shouldn't come into it. Like, and yeah, I understand why some women think they were born that way if they've had, like, lifelong experiences of loving women.
We were born that way. So
we all are.
I think that's what confuses some. Yeah.
I mean, we all had those experiences. And when you talked about your first lover, I mean, that was kind of my dilemma as a young woman. I was like, I have so much going on with me. Do I really have the energy to be a lesbian on top of having all these other, like, forms of oppression? Like, it was a conscious choice that I, like, I mean, I was young and had, like, my naive young mentality that I was working through, or I only had that, like, teenager brain. But, you know, it was like, well, I have to do this or I won't be normal, and then my life will be harder.
Yes.
And do I really want to incur more hardness for myself? So that was kind of like the mentality that I had, and it was, you know, kind of realizing that's what it was. Like, I got really kind of, like, disgusted, and I was like, I'm amazed that, like, because it wasn't just me. I know my girlfriends were going through this too. Like, all my friends were like, we had, like, conversations about, like, the weirdness of having to interact with males and, like, whether we actually liked any of them or not, which generally we didn't. But we had to force ourselves to, because reasons that really didn't exist, you know. We think we're a lot freer than I think we are. Yes. And that's what the whole femininity thing is about with children, is, like, breaking their ability to see themselves as, like, powerful in any way as well, I think.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about that too, and I'm glad you brought it up. Because I'm kind of amazed as well that, like, there's a lack of interest in women, like, breaking kind of with even the most basic feminine practices. Yeah. Like, I mean, I'm in feminist spaces on Facebook, and that's usually where I interact with Bev, and you can find her.
That's how we met, probably.
Yeah. I think so, yeah, actually.
Yeah, good groups. It's fun.
Yeah, and Bev moderates some good groups, so I'll leave links in the low bar if anyone wants to check those out. But I'm amazed at the conversations we can have about stuff that's as basic as dresses and long hair and shoes. Like,
we did that in the 70s. It's amazing.
You don't even have to be a feminist to get this stuff either. It's, like, really insane to me, like, how attached women are to the articles of their own oppression. Like,
yes. That's the confusion, though, I see when the arguments are with what I consider the liberal to right-wing feminists, who are not truly feminists. When we claim radical feminism for what used to be basic feminism, It's like there's this video that just went around of this little girl with a sword doing a kata that's incredible. There's no way she's going to be in a dress or high heels doing that. I mean, it's like in the 70s, there was all this understanding, even among het women, of not wanting to do all the things men wanted women to do, that femininity is male identified. Both masculinity and femininity are invented by men. And many het women, but certainly the lesbian community, did not want to look the ways men wanted women to look. I mean, the lesbian community is mostly femme in terms of growing up as girls that fit in and didn't fight femininity and learned the mannerisms and look and gestures and feeling, and what one friend calls their energy. But most look like dykes. And now, in the groups that I moderate, the women wanting to join the groups all look like they want to be porn stars. It's scary. It's really, really weird. It's very odd. I don't get it. They put toxic stuff on themselves. They look like caricatures. They're like drag queens, and that's the other issue. If women all stopped wanting to look like drag queens, the men who claim to be women would really stand out even more. They wouldn't have anything to emulate or caricature or fetishize. It's all about that, and it's all false, you know. But yeah, by the way, our international community is amazing. So many countries, so many ages of radical feminists, and most lesbians around the world we found online. But yeah, the whole femininity thing, and back to about choosing to be het or not, so much of that is based on feeling normal, not wanting to be a freak, and not just succumbing to peer pressure, but family pressure. Now, I never understood that because I didn't care what my family thought. I mean, I didn't want them to think of me as a freak in particular, but I didn't think they were making decent choices. So, but I've been amazed at some of the lesbians I've known who've gone back to men, in spite of the liberal feminist whining endlessly about how oppressed these women are and how they don't choose it and they're just victims, het women. I've seen enough lesbians go back to men to not think of them remotely as victims because they immediately get privilege and status, sometimes very concrete, like money. I mean, when my mother's generation, the idea of getting married a lot was like a prostitute contract. The idea is you pick one man and you get taken care of, and you get a better quality of life, certainly than you would being on your own or with a friend. My mother had a best friend who she loved. They could have been lesbians, and they both went off and married men because she didn't want to have to work. It's selling yourself really cheap. But, I mean, anyway, but the lesbians I know have gone back to men a lot. I believe the little bit I know about them, or the lot I know about them, because some have been ex-lovers, they want their families finally to accept them and love them. It's never going to happen anyway, and who cares? But they have basically sold themselves out to get that approval. And some of them really want attention from the general world, you know, walking around with the man on the arm and being the cute couple, het couple, and all that. But it's really clear it's all on this very crass, superficial, shallow level.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been an interesting thing to see over the years. But, yeah, we're not allowed now, in terms of the general liberal feminist community, to talk about choices. The choices that were talked about in the 60s and 70s. That, of course, all these things are choices. We're not allowed to say that now. It's very bizarre, the censorship by women who pretend to be radical feminists.
Mm.
Or rad femmes. When I say rad femme, I'm usually thinking of these extreme liberal to right wing women, which is why I don't use the term.
I don't like the term rad femme either. It
became
it's
trendy.
Like cute, yeah. I don't know. It just makes me think of like, I don't know, Tumblr or something, like all these. My brief forays into that community were just a lot of like, again, very young heterosexual women with privilege wanting to defend their male-identified choices and kind of use radical rhetoric to kind of act as though like women have no choices. But I feel like we have a responsibility as women who have a level of privilege to make the right choices. Like, I mean, I see women bring up like child rape victims, like, which a lot of us are. So
Yes,
that's annoying as hell, because it's
yes.
insulting. It's
yes.
insulting. But,
yeah.
They'll bring up, like, women in foreign countries who have maybe no rights, or, like, women who've been prostituted at an early age, right. And are in slavery conditions, like, because that happens. That happens
Literal
in
slavery.
Every city, you know.
Yeah.
This does happen to women everywhere. But, like, those women are not the ones out in the forefront defending their, like, rights to, like, identify with this stuff, and it's strange to me. Usually if those women get out of those scenarios, they're pretty angry about it.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm kind of amazed, like, that, you know, we as women who do have choices aren't taking more responsibility to, like, create more space for women to be freer, I feel. Like, I did a video last week, I think, about a woman had contacted me and was talking to me about, like, why she didn't feel that she could go out in public with unshaved legs. Just, like, she's in her, like, mid-20s, I think, this woman, and I was just like, you know, what's the worst thing that could happen? Like, you could be killed, right? That's the worst thing that could happen.
Not likely, but yeah.
It's not likely, though. And, like, you doing that means that other women will see it and will have the ability to be like, you know what, there's another option for me. I don't necessarily have to do that.
Yeah.
But it takes some of us who, like, do have a level of privilege being willing to step up and, like, live that life and, like, be visible.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not really a commitment to lesbian visibility as well, either. Well, our community is, like, decimated, but women don't want to be visibly lesbian, so how do we find each other?
I know. I keep seeing in these groups, this has gone on for years. Well, now there's some that are complaining how oppressed they were because they were pressured into a lesbian uniform, as if the heterosexual look is not a really stringently policed uniform.
Yeah.
And they're saying how oppressed they were when they're the ones doing the oppressing, when they're the ones doing the mainstream and following the male rules. What else was I going to say about that? What were we just talking about? It's more of that same kind of switching reality. Oh, and then in these groups, these lesbians are saying how painful it is that lesbians don't recognize them as lesbians. They're getting all this het privilege. They're getting all this approval. They're just fitting in, and it's a choice, and they're abandoning the lesbians who are really out. If all the lesbians look like lesbians, and if het women who were feminist, who cared, looked like dykes, which once was the case, then it would make things better for all the marginalized lesbians, better for butches. It would change so much. And in fact, if all women decided to do that again, the men claiming to be women would have no game to play, no place to go in terms of putting on their little dresses and makeup and high heels. The thing about shaved legs, too, is like where I live, I never would feel comfortable wearing anything that would expose my legs even. This isn't the hottest place on earth, but it gets pretty uncomfortable. So then I'm wondering, like, what are they doing? They're probably wearing these little dresses. And, I mean, it's just like, why? They wear things that are not comfortable, and why? But the ones complaining about not being recognized as lesbians, and then the lesbians who look like dykes rushing to their support saying, oh, yeah, that's terrible. And friends of mine have posted this recently, and I'm like, why? What are they complaining about?
Yeah, I mean, it's a choice to look a certain way. Like,
you wouldn't see this about other press groups, where the ones who can pass as the privileged group, when they're oppressed as a group, and they do things to their hair, their skin, their clothes, have plastic surgery to look more like the dominant European descent group. If they were saying, oh, it's a shame people don't recognize me for the race I really am, I mean, that community, those communities have so much more pride than lesbian communities would say, well, what the fuck are you doing? You know, it's just like, you're the one betraying us. It's very clear if you to seeing the parallels with other groups, with those who want to pass. So, I hope that was another long tangent, but So it's all relevant, and relative, but relevant, yeah. That we're in this together, it used to be understood, and now nobody wants to say anything about anything because we're supposed to just, I don't know, be passive and...
Yeah, that's the other thing. There's like, I watched a talk with Jermaine Greer, like, last week. Problematic feminist.
Yes.
As hell, but, like, also really brilliant in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But she said, like, something about how she was listening to this woman on TV talk about how she was sexually assaulted on a train. Like, some guy just came up behind her and, you know, rubbed his dick on her. And she just froze, and, like, it wasn't so much that she had frozen, because that can happen in that situation, especially if you never had that happen before. You're like, what is happening? This is really happening. It was that, like, the presenters, it was the Everyday Feminism Project, one of these, like, liberal feminist projects. They were just saying, or no, Everyday Sexism. So, yeah, they were just saying this is a totally normal response. She shouldn't be judged for her response. Instead of talking about, like, what we should do when that happens. So often women don't have tools. Like, we're creating a whole generation of very passive feminists who, like, have feminist rhetoric about some things, but, like, don't really have anything that's practical. Like, okay, if a man rubs his dick on you, what do? Shouldn't women be having these conversations? Like, about, like, what's the appropriate response? And I think, you know, just hurt him. Like,
exactly.
Yeah, or make a scene, especially if it's in a public place. Like, you know, like, create, like, don't let them get away with it.
Yes.
But we're creating this, like, situation. Like, it actually happened when I was at the Stop Porn Culture conference, and this is when I was new to radical feminism and just kind of, like, getting introduced to the ideas and reading literature and kind of deciding. I already knew I was, like, kind of past where this group was, Stop Porn Culture, in my analysis, but they had this table of young girls. They were, like, my age, maybe. I shouldn't say young girls. It's so hard not to see them as little girls, though, because they're like, they're not adults, essentially. They haven't, like, it's all that feminine kind of, like, learned helplessness shit. But Gail Dines went around with a microphone and had all these young women who were my age, or, you know, maybe some of them were even older than me at the time. I think I was 25 at the time. Tell these stories about men being sexually gross with them, or using them, or just, like, all this crap. And, like, you know, at the end, I think Julia Long, she, when we all got a chance to, like, respond to this, Julia Long was like, this is a perfect example of why we need political lesbianism. And, like, the room erupted. But, like, what I kind of took from it, I was like, why are we just listening to women's experiences of sexual violence is important. But we also need to, like, talk about what to do about sexual violence. Like, it can't just end there. We can't just keep women where they're at, you know, in terms of, like, I've been victimized. We have to, like, give them the tools to stop it.
Yes.
You know, and obviously we can't control what men do. They're always going to be sexually violent and predatory. But maybe we can teach women that they have options. Like, there are things we can do. Like, I mean, and that's something I know you taught, like, self-defense classes.
Right, for girls and women,
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that at all? Or, like, what you got
that was
about
an interesting thing, too, is I got involved with Bay Area Women Against Rape, which ended up being a group mostly with, if not all, with het women in the paid positions where they were getting up to $400 a month in addition to their salary for childcare. And we were getting paid a little bit of amount, and then suddenly we weren't getting any payment. And that was just so
not
typical.
fair.
And yet it seemed to be one of the most important things if girls and women were calling up this theoretical feminist group to get support after having been sexually assaulted, that they could at least learn self-defense, because the women in the classes, and we had taught girls too, would just feel so much safer and so much better. And we got such positive feedback, and there was really, even now I don't see a lot being offered like that the classes are either martial arts or they're really not what would work if you have very little training. So I did that for 10 years until they stopped giving us the $100 a month that we got, that basically, we couldn't go away anywhere it was like once a week. So you could never take a trip or go anywhere. So you're committed to one night a week. And it was wonderful. I really loved to do it. That should still be happening.
Yeah.
And that should be happening at all the schools. I mean, girls should be getting trained ongoingly.
Yeah, little girls should be trained. It should be happening in elementary schools because they're targets.
And they don't want them to be trained.
They
don't want them to.
No.
Yeah.
And they want to kind of, again, make them passive. Like, when I was in elementary school learning about sexual assault, like, I'd already experienced sexual assault by that time in my life. So it was like, well, this is a moot point. Like, but, like, my little Capricorn self there. So, like, this doesn't,
Did it help you to know that it was had happened to other girls, that you weren't alone with it? Because I didn't grow up with nothing like that. And it was sort of like, if anything happened, nobody was talking about it. Only when I was around other lesbians did it start being talked about.
It was all theoretical. Like, it's not like it was a safe place to talk about it happening to you. So, as an adult, I can look back on those situations. I was like, I know that girl was raped. I know that one was. I know that one. Just from, like, interacting and, like, thinking about how they interacted and how I behaved. Like, there are signs that little girls put out.
That's
when
true.
They have been, and
that's true.
It's obvious. To me, it's obvious. Like,
yes.
When a girl has been, like, sexually violated in some way.
Yes.
So, I can only, I mean, we all knew it happened. There was, like, we knew that it shouldn't happen, but that I feel like in some ways it made us feel like, but we didn't feel like we could have conversations with one another about it. Like, we didn't, and that's where the real stuff happens, and that's where the real healing happens, I think.
Yes.
Talk about your experiences with another woman as an equal, and get kind of past all of that. This is just happening to me sort of thing that kind of reinforces all of the, I don't know, it reinforces kind of, there's a script, I feel, that's like put out that you have to, like, respond to it in a certain way and that sort of thing. And none of it actually empowers women or girls, know, in any way to, like, reclaim their lives, And
what's happening in families, too, because not many will say, don't the adult women in the family, especially if they're living in the same house, know if it's like, when are the girls defended and when are they not? Often if it's the husband, father, stepfather, which is the usual, but brothers, other male relatives, they're usually put first. Yeah. And that's one of the things we're not supposed to talk about in the usual right-wing liberal feminism. In fact, they go at you like you're a monster to say, sometimes the women know and they choose the males. And they should be defending the little girls, and they don't for various reasons, not their own safety.
And we need to talk about that, too, because it has to stop.
Absolutely.
I mean, how are we supposed to create, like, a women's culture or, like, a real feminist movement at all if women have been betrayed by their mothers, by their, by women who are supposed to help them?
Yeah.
Like, that's a really big thing to get over, and a lot of women never do.
Yes, that's true. We'll get called haters for this, you know.
I don't,
How dare we? I
care about girls.
I do too.
And I'm vicious about it. I don't care. Like,
yes. And it can be
really
done.
Angry. Yeah.
I mean, there are a few women that went underground and disappeared and had really difficult lives defending their daughter from usually the husband. Not so much from their own son, though. But there are a few women that did that, and there was a whole underground network. But anyway.
I mean, that's stuff that needs to keep happening. I've only read about little snippets here and there. It's unfortunate because there isn't this continuation of, like, feminist community, and, like, I feel a big part of that is, like, ageism and, like, just classism.
Yes.
There's the only script that's allowed to be talked about is the official script, which the middle classes have written.
That's right.
So I really appreciate you being so vocal. And Bev, if those don't know Bev, she gets, like, banned all the time. And it's amazing to me, and I'm glad we're, like, doing this on video. So you can see what a sweet lady she is. Like, does she look hard? Like, does she look like she's going to hurt anyone? Or, like...
Well, you too. I mean, you're really courageous.
Yeah.
The slandering is the worst, too, is they just lie about you.
Oh, yeah.
These are supposed feminists. I mean, if they just said, we don't like you because you said this and this and this, how dare you say some women protect their sons instead of their daughters? But they don't. They just make up things.
Yeah.
So, and ban
us. Fine. That's fine. I mean, I don't...
Aww.
I think it's interesting, and it's a good experience to have in a lot of ways. You're way more patient with it than I am, though. I'm really amazed.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Like, well, you...
I need to get lessons then.
You do need to get less patient. But I've been amazed at the amount of time and effort you actually put into new women coming around. And you did it to me, and you did it to other women. I've seen it, and I'm just like, you are invested in other women, and that is really important. And I think that's why, like, I did the review of your book that you wrote with Linda and Reston.
Yes.
And, yeah, I kind of had these ideas floating around in my head, and I was dissatisfied with how things were going, and, like, reading your book made a lot of things just so clear. Because it was like, well, let's talk about why these things happen. Why do communities fall apart? Like, why are we having such issues? And it's like, let's be real about it. Like, and it, like, forced me to, like, look at myself in a lot of ways, and I think that's good. Like, a lot of women, though, are just so, I think maybe for some of them it's more about, like, having a community of women they can just talk to about stuff, and I guess that's fine, but I wish they wouldn't be... Ooh, hold on a second.
Sure.
That's
scary.
Stop the recording. Okay, everyone. Thanks for tuning in again. I got a package, so we had to stop recording for a moment, but we're back on track now. I just wanted to say that, like, I think we were talking about how Bev is very patient and, like, goes out of her way to, like, help especially newer women, like, or women that are just coming around to radical feminism, like, really understand the different viewpoints and, like, all of that. She gets attacked quite a bit, and she's afraid of being attacked for this as well. So, a little bit.
If they would just ask questions or let me answer with no lying, it's the slander that's mean.
Yeah. I mean, I've been there, so.
Oh, I know. You get attacked too, and it's like, what the fuck? They don't even know what you're doing. You're brilliant.
Yeah, so are you.
And you're nice. Yes. And you're funny.
So are you. It's unreal. It's like,
and you love rats.
Yes. Oh, I wish, maybe we should do, like, a video at some point where we just talk about rats. Because...
Oh, wouldn't that be amazing?
Yeah. I mean, you know that somebody is a good person. I think, you know, when we first interacted with one another, there was the rat, like, connection. And, like, you know that somebody is at least decent if they can care for, like, a little rat. Because once you open your heart to this, like, creature that's been so marginalized and so misunderstood, you know that somebody is a lot deeper than, like, the average person. Yes. So,
and they change us, too.
They do.
They're amazing. They're amazing.
So, yeah, I was just saying, like, obviously, I think what is going on is, like, ideological, and obviously it's not about behavior necessarily, because women who engage in very nasty behavior are still allowed to engage in the community, are still given a lot of respect. And it's just because of the, you agree with me, therefore, or you don't challenge me, is what it's more like. Because there are so many disagreements within, I guess, the general community at large. But yeah, I think it's, it's just unfortunate, really, that, instead of disagreeing or, like, being open about what the disagreements are so that women can choose properly, there's, like, this kind of manipulation and desire to shut down, especially lesbian separatist analysis.
Yeah.
Like, that's not radical feminism. It's like, well, as I've said before, it's the logical conclusion of radical feminism.
Yes, it's the most radical of radical feminism.
It's what the solution is. Like, if you believe that this is a problem, that men are what you say that you think they are, then it makes sense that we need to start thinking about how to live lives outside of them and, like, actually invest in one another. Because, I mean, like, nobody else is going to invest in lesbians. So,
it's the logical conclusion of women only.
Yeah.
Too.
Well, I mean, that's another issue. So much of, I don't know if we have time to really get into that, or if you know why that is. Was this a problem back in the day with women consistently trying to disrupt women-only space and, like, destroy it? Like,
no.
Or
separatists were hated, always, but the separatist principles were basic, which is we had women-only space, and it was fought for. I mean, physically sometimes if men would come to the door of an event. It changed first when women wanted to bring their boys in. Now, there were lesbian separatists who had sons. There were a lot, actually, high percentage, and that was interesting. But it was sort of like, and that's in terms of defining separatism, because somebody just wrote to me today that she would be a separatist except for her male relatives. Well, some separatists define themselves that way based on choice of friendships, but they do relate to their male relatives. And then others don't relate to any males by choice as much as possible. And then some, of course, think, well, you have to work, so you have to relate to men. But that's not about separatism at all. It's who you choose to be with as friends or companions or whatever. But anyway, the principles were all there, and then women wanted to bring their sons in. And then it became a big fight, and they didn't give a damn about the girls. And then as lesbians or women who said they were lesbians started getting pregnant, which in our book we said is not a lesbian act, but is heterosexual, they were producing 85% boys. And, I mean, there were taunts even like, well, are you afraid of the boys? Well, first of all, it changes the entire atmosphere to have boys present. But why doesn't anybody care about the girls? And then there were stories of really little girls, like 3 years old, being raped by really little boys, and the boys being supported. And we wrote in our book about that, too, at an event in Boston. There was this talent show thing. So there were all these different things presented. One was a short film, basically of one lesbian son sexually assaulting another lesbian's daughter. And that, it was like throwing her on the ground, making all these jokes, lesbian kind of jokes, sticking his face in her vulva. She had a dress on, of course, and he was all like how little boys are, the little jacket and the little, and the trousers. And it was horrible. He was hitting her, and the audience just loved it. And I was just like, that's when things change. And it kind of opened the door to later let in adult men, especially the ones who say they're women and lesbians. But we still had women-only space, and it was still fought over. And I think the only reason we really don't have much now is basically money. It's too expensive to live. Almost everybody I know is just trying to survive, with a few exceptions. And there isn't the money to have coffee houses, bars. I mean, there used to be tons of bars here before there was feminism in the Bay Area. There are lesbians that own coffee houses and bars, but these are public places. So we lost all that stuff. But women only was kind of the basis. It was accepted. It was what made our lesbian community. And at that point, even though separatists were still hated, there was much more support to question things. Like now, it's very right wing. And you're right, it's very class controlled, class privilege controlled in terms of what we're allowed to talk about. Or it's very interesting, the policing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's happening online. So we have to have our unsafe groups online.
Yeah.
Which is great. We can do that.
I mean, yeah, it kind of given us an ability to, like, at least find one another. And,
yes.
I mean, I definitely, it was very, the classism was apparent as soon as I kind of came into it. You know, and I came from a classist left-wing background, but I experienced a lot of classism there as well. You know, like, I didn't have the sort of lifestyle that a lot of leftists have, where they're, like, university and, like, middle class, and, like, it's an intellectual thing, and they decide to join with the working classes out of some sort of, and it was just like, this is just my life.
Yeah, your culture, too.
Yeah.
Because that was part of it, too, is the way we communicate, that some of us said we were working class or poverty class, and backgrounds separate from how we grew up. But others, they know, even if they aren't aware of class as an issue at all, they know, they sense if they've got privilege, and they go after you, and they try to make the community reflect their culture, even though they're the minority. There's far more class oppressed people, say, in the U.S., and I think other countries too, than the class privilege. But the middle classes, and they do what I call class-splaining, as opposed to mansplaining the men do, and I've been seeing that in our groups too. It's a fight. And Megan and I, you know, even though she's not a lesbian, but we share so much of the same politics, we would get band together partly because of our shared politics, and we supported each other. I'm feel very grateful to and protective of Megan Diana Mackin, who wants to be called Diana, by the way.
Okay.
With a small d. It gets confusing because I want people to know who she is when I refer to her. Then I found you, and there's so many others, and it's just like, but the class stuff, right down the line, to me, it's just, if it's okay just to say one more thing, it's really basic, beyond the fact some of these privileged ones don't have to worry about survival. They have this incredible lifestyle, access to health care. It also comes down to they feel better than us. They feel they're superior. And they're not. And I think a lot of them are not too bright because they think that. We dare not say that, but how can they think they're superior? And yet that's the biggest divide if we don't even count access to money and privilege. Just the way they talk and act.
Yeah.
And that they've dominated radical feminism. Not anymore, but they've tried.
Yeah, I mean, definitely trying to fight that. Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, if that's all that there is, then it's not really of interest to women from our backgrounds. So why would they be interested or involved? But I know for me, radical feminism changed my life drastically.
Yeah.
And made it so much more open, so much better, and I know the potential it has to, like, you know, help women. So it's important. But yeah, I do grow tired of the, like, there is a level of elitism and nastiness that can come about, and it isn't even necessarily about money either. It's just where their background is, how they were raised. You know, once you are raised in a middle class or even upper class, although there aren't that many of them.
They're more upper middle than we might be aware of.
Yeah.
One friend helped me online with a dear friend I've been having trouble with, who's just very... Anyway, she knows better than we do, but yeah, it's amazing. And it helps to know all this because it depersonalizes the oppression we've suffered and how we're treated. All of it, radical feminism. And to me, radical feminism means fighting classism and racism and ableism and fat oppression and everything that hurts females and is hurting the earth. It's part of it, which some of the ones I call segregationist as well as right-wing, because they don't want us to discuss inequalities because they want to keep their power. But once we're aware of all this, it depersonalizes what's been done to us. And then we can lie.
I mean, it's still hurtful. I mean, I had some hurtful interactions with women, like, this week that were, like, kind of just, like, immediately nasty, immediately shut down. And it was just, like... And I get this, like, impression that they just assume that I'm combative as well. Because
Right,
of what my politics are, that I'm actually trying to be supportive or something. Yeah. But because there's been disagreement, there's this automatic assumption of combativeness. So that's a problem. But I mean, women really need to get over themselves in a lot of ways.
What happened?
Huh?
Do you feel like you can talk about it online or in person, or?
It doesn't matter because it's just something that's happened a bunch of times. Like it's not like to talk about this one instance. It's like I've kind of pulled back and stopped engaging in the wider radical feminist community because of the toxicity. But when I do, sometimes those things happen because I don't know if women are just threatened or they believe like they want to protect themselves and they have this kind of mindset of like there's only so much to go around and there's only so many likes that I can get and there's only like so many fans or followers I can have or like stuff like that.
It's so weird. They're obsessed with it. Mm-hmm. We don't even want that. We just want equality. Yeah.
I mean, I do want fans and followers. I'm not going to
you do? Okay. What the hell?
Just because I make content, so I want people to watch it.
That's different, though. It's like you don't want it to be...
I don't want fans. Yeah, I don't want...
Yeah, you want, like, make contact and then have equal relationships with helping learn about... Yeah, but these others, they literally do want followers. Yeah. They really do. And it's very cliquish. It's very cultish. And they're scared they're going to lose. I don't know what they're scared they're going to lose, but yeah, you're right. That's...
Yeah. I mean, but, like... I just think the more of us that are out there doing these things and, like, being productive, the better it is, you know?
Yes.
Because it's more likely that a woman will come across something that resonates with her and that will help her. So, I wanted to talk with you, which you brought it up earlier, kind of segue into this, because I think we should talk about it, because it is one of the issues that I think you get a lot of hate for. So I want to give you an ability to talk about it, which is not going to shut you down. The motherhood issue, which I have gotten hate for. And I do believe that motherhood confers privilege, and you wrote about how it does. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know who wrote all the words in your book, but I assume that you contributed to that section.
Oh, yeah. Linda and I did a lot. Poor Linda, she typed it all. And then, of course, friends helped type to go online, and I did a bunch and edit it. But Linda and I edited the whole damn thing. It was difficult. But
that's an amazing thing to me, that it's all available for free, and you, like, aren't necessarily a tech genius, and you put it up online, and women still won't read it. Like,
I know. And it's been translated. Yeah, that's true. I know. What is it? It's very odd because they'll read these books and then they'll keep quoting the sort of liberal feminist stars. There's all this strange stuff. I haven't even read most of them. I used to read anything feminist that came out, and I just got too fucking bored because unless I'm learning something new, like in some of the anthologies about oppressions women suffer, we learn things. But anyway, what was I going to say about... just two of us who are working class, the major part of the work, and it was a struggle. But what was I going to say about it? Yeah, why don't they just read it? Because I keep having to argue. The whole point was to not have to go over it personally and be exhausted. Linda and I are chronically sick, to be exhausted over and over. Part of the book is missing, which is the personal stories of Linda and Rustin, and Linda didn't want her personal story. So if anybody wants to get the book, it's really beautiful. She's a fucking good writer.
Yeah.
She's really good. I wish she'd do more. She's wonderful. You got the book, though.
I do. Yes, one of my prized possessions.
Aw. But this is great. We can do things in this online medium now, that we can reach those, now that everything costs too much, too. But motherhood, yes. Okay, so yeah, that was a big thing that we knew was going to be a serious problem, and it still is, but it's basic. What do men want? Everybody pregnant, all the women pregnant. Yes. Keep making more males. Keep patriarchy going. Keep making more victims, more, we know. So we start with that. What do they want? And then And it's like acting, like we were talking about at the whole AIDS thing earlier, as if some men don't want AIDS and they're going out and getting it. Women complain terribly about how oppressed they are as mothers, or how others will complain about motherhood being oppressed, but women want to reproduce. Anyway, and we're not supposed to talk about that.
Yeah, and we have to, because it divides the movement completely.
Absolutely.
And in so many ways. I'm so grateful that, like, we could talk about this, because it's like, where to begin with the amount of, like, behavioral patterns that women adopt because they've been mothers, like, the talking down to other women. And they view you as a child if you don't have children. That's the other thing. That you're like an overgrown child that needs to
forever
with their
It doesn't matter their age and yours.
Yeah.
Forever. Yeah. Rustin is the one who was aware of a lot of that in her community, which was a much stronger community than I ever saw in the U.S. But yeah, that it affects all the relationship patterns. And they've had power over somebody that they could beat, torture, kill, make mind at the very least. That's pretty amazing. Anyway, don't want to interrupt.
I mean, it kind of creates this, when you have, that's the other aspect. I mean, you have, as a mother, privilege over children, specifically girl children. But, like, you know, when you have that level of control and power over another individual, like, it does change you drastically, I think. And we do need to talk about the ways in which it does. And, you know, I'm just kind of, we're so, I don't know, I'm not you and I, but, like, women are just very sensitive about it. And I get that women love their children, but, like, you know, women, it has to be discussed, it has to be talked about, and we need to figure out what to do about it as well, because we can't encourage women to reproduce. Like, obviously the overpopulation issue is one aspect that isn't really touched on. Like, there's this unwillingness to deal with, like, other issues as well, I think, in the radical feminist community. Like, women are just so oppressed, so we must just focus on that. And, yeah, we are. But, like, I mean, overpopulation is going to contribute to women's lives being much harder, so we need to figure out ways of combating it.
Yes.
And
why do women want to do it? And they complain about being with men, and they say they're bound to men because they've had kids. As if they don't know that's going to happen. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
I don't know. I figured this out when I was a child, like that.
I know.
And I mean, I wasn't particularly politically astute. I mean, I had an interest in politics, but I could just figure out that if I were to be a mother, that certain things would happen. I knew I would get praise for it. I knew I would be accepted by my family in ways that, like, I'll never be accepted now. So, I knew that it would confer. I mean, like, I got so many messages about, like, how you wouldn't understand anything until you had children.
Oh, yeah. They tell us directly that.
And they still do it. Like, mothers will directly tell you this. Like, you don't know what love actually is. Just the most arrogant, insulting things until you, like,
have this horrible, unequal relationship where you can do whatever you want to your poor kid.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But it's not just that. I mean, the society, we don't talk about this, and I think, you know, femininity is related to motherhood privilege as well, because it's a feminine act instead of a heterosexual act. Like, women get rewards for either having been heterosexual or performing some sort of role. Like, if you're a lesbian, you can mitigate some of your oppression by having a child. Like, people will look at you like you're more female, like you're less of a freak. Like, you've fulfilled your duty to society in some way. Like, so you do get treated a bit better. I mean, and this is just, it seems apparent to me. Like, we had this discussion as well where we talked about, like, disability and, like, how difficult it is for disabled women to get benefits, or for women who've been in accidents, like, to get any help or support. But women who are pregnant get governmental support. And in some countries, they get housing. They get,
yes, they sure do.
They get all sorts of benefits. And it's kind of... Yeah. And a lot of women will deny this happens as well. That's the other enraging thing. They will gaslight when you bring this up. And it's not as if we want to take these things away, but we want to talk about how, like, society does view you as more than, and therefore those messages get internalized by you and by others that have more worth because you've read. Like, it's important to, like, deal with that. Do we want to have a community where things like that, you know, divide women on axes of, like, inferior and superior? Like, or do we want equality, like, as much as we possibly can? Like, shouldn't we be striving towards that? Like, I don't know. It's a frustrating topic because women are so sensitive about it, and they slander, like, outright slander, as you said. Like, they'll say that you hate them, you hate mothers completely, you're a misogynist, as if all that there is to be in a woman is being a mother. Like,
and they just want to shut us down. This is there's somebody in our groups recently who keeps mentioning mothers, and she's not a mother, I don't think, in terms of, like, oh, and the mother is like this worshipful, think this or do this, or like bringing in the idea of the mothers for whatever the issue was. It wasn't even coherent about how they're more special or something. And I've been told, you know, like, that we're like mothers who have, you know, because we wrote our book, and it's like, no, no. Oh, no. It just permeates. You know, I didn't even see motherhood in a way worshipped on the same level outside feminism, in a way that's inside feminism, with, like, in terms of the community I grew up with, and most of the women were mothers, but it wasn't like they went on and on about it. I mean, it was just like they're het women, so that's what they did. But in the feminist community, there's all this, you know, pontificating and, you know, worshiping of the idea of motherhood. That doesn't help either.
Yeah, glorifying it. Yeah.
It's very weird.
But it's amazing to me because it is, like, I think we talked before about this, but it's harmful to women physically.
Yes.
And obviously, they're, like, it's harmful to your life because you have to dedicate so much time to another person. So is this really a feminist act in the first place? Right. To be investing all of your woman's energy into another human being who possibly could be male.
Yeah.
And then secondly, like, what else was I going to say? So that the investment in that, what was I going on about? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's
long day.
Yeah, I know. Wow.
But yeah, there's the glorification, and then, you know, that, but the physical trauma that happens to women, you know, women do die from childbirth. They have physical complications. That gets ignored. Oh, gosh. I mean, this conversation came up in a group. I think it was that big feminism group. I think you're banned from there.
Well, I was banned when Nick and Kathy Brennan were together, and I was talking about Kathy pretending to be anti-trans and having her trainee man friend in the lesbian caucus, and boom, I got banned, and so did another working class old butch who she thought was Gals. They thought was Gals Mag, but wasn't. Didn't matter.
Yeah, I remember
that woman. Kick her out. So I haven't tried to get back. I've been told I could, but I'm like, I'm actually scared to be in a group I can be banned from, because why bother? Mm-hmm. But yeah, but it is upsetting. So anyway, you were remembering. Oh, I know. They were throwing pieces of our book out to, like, get the whole group to turn on me. Just segments of our chapter against motherhood.
Yeah,
that was done again recently.
Manipulate. Yeah,
that was done in another Facebook group recently. This week, a few days ago, No Anodyne, Nan Andine did, and it's like, well, thank you. Here's our book link. Go read it now. Mm-hmm. But
I mean, yeah, so many women want to be offended but you didn't say anything that wasn't true.
right.
So, I mean, okay, it offends you. Why does it offend you? Like, deal with that. Like,
Yeah.
what is so offensive about these things that are true? I mean, it is what it is. Like, there are facts and there are opinions, and what you said are real things that happen, real dynamics between women, and it's being ignored. And of course, like, the mothers, they get so nasty. I have never been so verbally abused in my life as I have by, like, mothers online. Like,
wow.
of any group. And I have had porn sick men, like, coming at me here on YouTube, like, for weeks. And it wasn't as disturbing. It wasn't as disturbing because it wasn't so personal, for one.
Right.
And it wasn't so, like,
Right.
intended with, like, you just can tell the amount of, like, rage going into, like, I hate you, how dare you, my life has been so hard. And I do believe that mothers have had hard lives, because
Sure.
I wouldn't ever want to be a mother.
Right.
It seems like the worst thing on earth. But I do know that if I was a mother, what status I would get from it.
Yeah.
And now they're wanting to play this game where, like, some of them are saying, oh, well, it confers status, but not privilege. But status is privilege.
Of course it is.
It's a
you made a
form of
joke
privilege. Yeah.
a couple of months ago and said you were pregnant, and the response on Facebook was horrifying.
Horrifying,
oh,
yeah.
my goodness, congratulations. Oh, that's wonderful. Whoever they were all so happy you joined the fold.
Yeah.
If you're okay. Aw.
All right, so we're back. We've had a couple of interruptions, but, you know, that's life. So, before we were talking about motherhood and kind of the privilege it confers and how it divides women. So we wanted to kind of talk a little bit more about that, and maybe also talk about some other issues that come up with it. So, I mean, this is really just a chance to, like, say anything you want about the topic, because it's so, like, misunderstood, and so often you're accused of, like, hating mothers or bashing mothers, when really it's just, like, this is basic feminism, it seems. To me, anyway.
It used to be.
Yeah.
Although mothers were always kind of worshipped in our community. There was always this thing, they got extra attention and credit, and, you know, the rewards are amazing. I mean, there's so much, the fact that they're trying to, the men in charge are trying to destroy abortion rights, I think says kind of everything. So why any woman who then chooses to get pregnant really needs to think about why she's participating in this. But one of the examples of policing and control is a good friend of mine, she was being a single woman who was falling in love with women, and her mother wanted her to get pregnant. And she was like, why don't you just go out and have a one-night stand and give me a grandchild? And my friend was like, I'm gonna pretend you didn't say that. But it was like, she wants her daughter to go get raped, possibly fucked, possibly get an STD, God knows what, AIDS could kill her, and having a baby could kill her.
Yeah.
Why? I mean, what the fuck? That was unbelievable that she cared about her only child that little to want her to go and get pregnant and pressured her.
Mm-hmm.
And some women will obey.
Yeah.
And it's horrific. But anyway, that's...
Yeah, most women are obeying, and that's the problem. Like,
yeah.
They it's like there's this, and we don't even have space to offer a counterpoint. Like, you don't have to have children. You can build a great life without children. Like, actually, your life will be, in so many ways, richer if you don't have children, because you get to focus on you. Like, there's no way to have children in this society, you know, unless you're incredibly wealthy and want to hire out somebody else to take care of the drudgery of it.
Right.
That is going to do anything but, like, you know, take away a good portion of your time and energy. I mean, like, yeah.
I was just going to say how right-wing liberal pretend feminism changed things, because when I was a kid, it was this big shame in the family that my mother's sister had to get married because she'd gotten pregnant. It was like this big shame. Then suddenly, decades later, women are pressuring their unmarried daughters to get pregnant. At least there used to be that kind of protection where that pressure wouldn't be that direct because the mothers didn't want their daughters to get pregnant unless they had a husband. So it's like, that's part of how things have changed. I mean, I'm not quite sure what that all means, but things are getting worse and not better in that framework. And the way the patriarchy is now, except like in China, which they're reversing their rule, the law, they want women to get pregnant in the U.S. especially. They want the population to keep doubling for the whole economic system, even though there aren't enough resources.
Mm-hmm.
And if you bring a population, people flip out that's not the problem. They're like, it's how the resources are distributed or some crap. But
that may be the case,
doubling.
But like, we still live under capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
So like, that's the annoying thing. It's like,
yeah,
the world we want to live in and the world we live in are not the same.
Yeah.
Like, this is the inability for people to deal with reality. Like, life isn't fair. Like, they still haven't gotten that basic concept down. Like,
right.
we don't,
right.
We don't live in a society where resources are distributed in a fair way. And if they were distributed fairly, I mean, what would that mean for us as child-free women? Would we, again, like, who's distributing and deciding what's fair? Are we getting the resources that we need?
Nope.
Like, no, I don't think so. We're going to be at the bottom, like we're used to, you know?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I got all bad about that.
No, it's amazing. My ex is English, and her daughter's English, and she moved to Ireland with a new baby that she just had. And she was given a house with many rooms, money. I mean, it just was unbelievable. This is even as the English being oppressors moving to Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
It's astounding. I mean, there's less support in the U.S., but there certainly is in other countries. But in the U.S., so much of the support is emotional. It's that whole status being normal, the height of normal.
Mm-hmm.
The height of normal. And why women who are saying they're lesbians continued injecting themselves with semen when they knew it was 85% males they were making. It's really bizarre.
I mean, I can only assume that they just didn't care about the consequences or about other women. I mean...
Or girls, yeah.
Yeah, or girls. I mean... And I think that's something that we have to deal with. Like, one of the reasons that the lesbian feminist community doesn't exist like it used to is that women pulled out because of having babies, for one thing, you know? Like, if you are in this, like, mode of recreating a nuclear family, essentially,
right,
with two moms instead of a mom and a dad, you're gonna not have time or resources or energy for a lesbian community. That's something that requires, like, dedication and time and energy. And
massive. And then they're taking care of their grandchildren. Because I'm now in the age group that I meet these women. And they can't, it's just like, they're lesbians. They can't talk about anything but careers, past careers, husbands, ex-boyfriends, children, and now grandchildren. It's just like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very unfortunate. Like,
mm-hmm.
There's so much more to life. Like, well, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and another thing, I mean, and I appreciate talking with you because, you know, you are older, so you've had kind of this experience where, like you talked about, a couple of decades ago, women would be ashamed to be pregnant out of wedlock, and now it's like the norm.
Like 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah,
it slowly changed, yeah. And now they celebrate it.
Yeah, now it's celebrated. It's like, yes, you're a baby. And I mean, there's just not really any, I mean, obviously women have the right to have children outside of, and I definitely think having a child around a male is not a good idea. Mm-hmm. But, like, it's just astounding to me why women are choosing to set up their lives so difficult.
Yeah. And
acting as though, like, they have no idea about this, because it's very clear for early on that your life is going to be a lot of work for others. And, like, this is the thing, they say that, like, if you believe in mother privilege or motherhood conferring privilege, that you hate mothers or you're bashing them or you don't think that their lives are difficult. I think their lives are incredibly difficult, but, like, there has to be this understanding that you can have a difficult life or your life can have a lot of challenges and you still will have status and privilege,
Yes.
like, over other people, like, or in reference to relation to other people. Like, there's this myopic focus on just you, and, like, feminism should be about, like, looking at all women, you know, and, like, okay, well, what is your dynamic to women who don't have children? So, like, in some ways, our lives may be better because we don't have, like, to deal with children, but, like, there's a real level of disrespect, and, I mean, I think I took a screenshot of a woman where we were talking about this subject. Her analysis of why, you know, women who are child-free would be talking about this at all was that we were just jealous that we didn't get as many likes on our selfies as pictures of people's kids. Which, of course, they assume that you hate children as well, if you are critical of the institution of motherhood. But it's like, as feminists, we have to be critical of institutions that are patriarchal. Like, it's an institution where you're relating to men and you're doing their work for them, their reproductive labor for them.
In a way, it's more important in patriarchy for get women pregnant than married to men.
Yeah.
It's really powerful in terms of one of the most important rules to obey, to be fitting in as the patriarchal, obedient woman.
Yeah.
One of the cons, too, in the group, I keep saying, and it's like, nobody wants to learn from history or the recent past, not even distant past, but recent, is the whole thing about raising a feminist daughter and raising a feminist son. And some of the children raised by these lesbian feminists have been the worst. Like that horrible pornographer, Toby Hillmeyer, who, you know, says he's butch, and he's got videos of him being wanked off online, and he went to the Butch Voices conference and got into a power position, did a workshop, got on their board, helped censor me from doing a workshop. And he's just effeminate, disgusting man. But he used to go to Michigan. His moms brought him to Michigan. So he got an insight into the lesbian community and wants access to it. And then some of the women raised by these women are not any prizes either. It's like, it's the Messiah complex. Why do they think their kid is going to be better? They're not necessarily. And if you care for girls, don't make more of them or reproduce and end up making more males. It's all convoluted, but we're not supposed to question it.
Oh, I mean, I'm glad you kind of, like, brought up that situation, too. It's so offensive that you, a butch woman, were censored because of the feelings of a effeminate man.
Yes.
So that's...
A pornographer man. Yeah. Yep.
But, yeah, I mean, I don't know what it is about... It's not mothers. They think. I don't think all of them think this, obviously, but the ones who have kind of their head up in the clouds and not here in reality, like, they really can't deal with the fact that their kids. You're not likely to raise kids that are clones of you, and so this is an argument they often throw out, like, well, if we don't reproduce, then the right wing is going to reproduce, and like. That's not the case. I wasn't raised to be a radical feminist. Were you raised to be a lesbian separatist?
Nope.
No, nobody indoctrinated me in my belief system. No. Like, you have to, I mean, part of being a parent is, like, you have to, like, let them become who they are.
Right.
You can't control that. That they are a different person than you, completely. And if they're male, even if you, I don't know, it just assumes that women haven't been trying to change their sons and raise feminist sons since time immemorial. How often have women, like, been like, my son's going to be different. I'm going to teach him better. He's going to know. That's right. how to treat women, and maybe some things get through, like don't beat women or some shit like that. Like, so maybe they won't hit their wife, but like overall, it's not going to change the problem if the problem is like an inherent thing with maleness. So, and also, even if it weren't that, which I believe it is, like when there's so much privilege that they're going to opt into as adults, as males, that you can't compete with that.
Yeah.
There's no way of getting around it. Like, you have to be realistic about it, and so many women just are unwilling to be realistic about it because of their emotional attachment to their sons, and it's a problem. Yeah. I mean, gotta let that go, that you... Yeah. It also, again, blames mothers for the crimes that their sons commit. Absolutely. It's not a woman's fault if her son is a serial killer. We gotta stop that mentality, too.
I love that post. Were you the one that did the post about moms?
Yeah, the woman holding her son, and it was Jason, I think, or something.
One of those horrible serial killers.
Yeah. My son didn't do shit.
Oh, that's perfect. And women forget, I brought this up and I got so attacked. The day may come when the wonderful son or even daughter can lock up the mother in an institution. And a lot of women have been killed by their sons. We're not supposed to even mention that.
Yeah, killed or raped by their sons.
That too, oh my God, yeah.
There was a case this past year where a woman, like, she pressed charges against her son for raping her. He was like 14 years old. And she dropped the charges. But this was in the news. And, you know, a lot of, it was just like a perfect example, again, of this situation. Like, she didn't raise her son to be a rapist. Right. So, I mean, so you have all this, like, victim blaming shit that goes in there. Like, males are a threat to women, regardless of who the women are. Yeah. Even their own mothers. So, I don't know. I don't know. It's a sad situation, but we need to be able to talk about it because women need to know that there are other options. Like, you don't have to breed. Right. When they're getting pressure from everywhere. Yeah. Friends, family, yeah. And so many of these women are so unhappy with their lives as mothers. So I'm just curious. It's like, I don't know if misery loves company, and they just are like, I was miserable, but if a woman wants to be miserable, that's her choice, and I'm going to defend it. And it's like, okay, like, that's not really an ambition to be fighting for as a feminist, to let women help women make miserable choices. We should be helping them get out of that. It's very weird, the censorship about it. I mean, they're unhappy, but they also don't want to have it discussed that, you know, women can choose not to do it. And, you know, maybe it's too late for them, but maybe other women could, you know, see some conversation and think, you know, like, do I want to do this to myself? Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. It's too bad. It really is unfortunate. It is amazing we're not allowed to talk about it without serious repercussions, and yet it's one of the most basic feminist issues. It's bizarre. And why the mothers are enshrined as the ideal. It's on so many levels, it's bizarre. I mean, yeah, there's this tendency within feminism, I think, to glorify certain aspects of womanhood that are really just oppression. Yeah. Like, women who are really hard workers and, like, you know, do all this stuff without complaining, like, they're, like, often praised, you know? Yes. Or women who are unwilling to, like, get into conflict or, like, that sort of thing. That's considered to be a positive trait, but it's not positive. It's really bad for feminism itself and for the women themselves. Like, we should be kind of helping women get out of those sort of patriarchal behaviors. Yes. You know, and expand, you know, their abilities. instead of taking advantage of, their subservience. Like, because I see a lot of women who are very feminine just doing a lot of shit work and, like, not really complaining or, like, just thinking that's their lot. And it's like, is it really... I don't know, the other thing I've thought about, and I'm so glad, I'm kind of going to go touch on something you talked about before. You brought up, like, how you stopped working or doing the, the self-defense stuff when they stopped paying you, and, like, or I don't know if you stopped when they stopped paying you, but, like...
It was an enormous amount of time and commitment and never being able to ever go anywhere.
Yeah. Well, I think
3 years.
I'm amazed at how much, like, women are expected to, like, put out of themselves and never get anything back. Like, but they would pay the mothers. And
they not only got full pay, they got this $400 at that point.
Yeah.
40 years ago.
Mhm. Is that 40? Wow.
35 years ago. That was a fuck of a lot of money. An extra $400 a month.
Yeah.
Just for the child care besides their full pay, which we only got like this little bit. We got like, I forget, $20 for each class we taught. And we couldn't leave the area. We were slotted into every 8 weeks we had classes. So 10 years. It was a big deal to go away.
Yeah.
It's very limited. So that was interesting. I mean, but that was typical. It's never questioned. It's just their priority. They're much, much more important.
I mean, I've been in, like, feminist groups and places where you're expected to throw in for childcare.
Oh, that's right.
Or, like, you're expected to do extra work so mothers can take off early. As if you don't have a life or stuff that might be going on, like, with you that, would require that you leave. Nobody wants to let me go home early because I'm sick.
Right.
Like...
That was one of the first things I saw in this my old lesbian feminist community, where these lesbians that didn't have kids were like fighting over who was going to line up to do childcare for the mothers. And some of them were like women who later became stars in the community, had all this free childcare. And I remember we got really attacked at our separatist gathering in 1983 because we'd put on the leaflet, no childcare. It was like, why should lesbians who've decided they never wanted to have kids or been lesbians their whole lives take care of somebody else's choice to be heterosexual? And that wasn't at the point when lesbians were deciding to have kids. These were kids from heterosexual marriages, and yet it was just like enshrined.
Yeah.
A religion, a cult, really.
Yeah, a cult of motherhood.
Yeah.
That is interesting that you did that. I think that's really powerful, actually, to make that statement, because so few are willing to do that, or even think that it even is necessary, or that lifelong lesbians are worth it.
Right.
Right? Like, that they are valuable enough as a group of people to have a space that is completely theirs, that is not, like, tainted by heterosexual shit. Like, why is that wrong?
Yeah, just for a few hours one day.
Yeah. Where they can hang out and do whatever. Like, doesn't matter. But it's just, even to have, like, that space is, like, a problem.
Yes.
Like, yes. And we're fighting now, like, women, I find, with this modern radical feminism are so willing to just open up the spaces to men. Like, being a male children, or just like, oh, we want to have a male speaker at this event, or we want to have an inclusive event of everyone.
Right.
And it's like, like, well, why?
Yes.
Why do they matter? Why do they matter so much? So I can only imagine the kind of shit you would get if you said no children or no child care available.
Right.
Like, I'm sure, did women try to bring children anyway? Or
they didn't. That was amazing.
Yes.
I know.
Imagine.
But we got attacked. We really had to fight over it. We had to waste time on it. But you were talking about disability before, too, and there's that whole issue of who do the meager resources go to among lesbians or feminists, and who gets support. And the mothers come top of the line, and very little is even done to make places accessible when it can be done. But yeah, that's being ignored about health issues and so much else.
I mean, so many women are sick from, obviously, the toxic environment, the just the stress of living under oppression. Oppression kills, having to deal with so much. But, also, trauma, sexual abuse. These things cause women to have serious health problems in their lives. Especially, women who have those problems often end up feminists. So, why isn't there more done to facilitate, some kind of, understanding or support or help for women with these issues?
Yeah.
We have to fight, really, to do it. And, it's so frustrating.
Yeah.
I had an interaction, the first time I ever got, really hated on for the whole motherhood thing. I'd complained about a young man being at a feminist conference where he was chasing around, he was a toddler, and he was chasing around a little girl during the screening of this film, Lesbiana, about, lesbian suffrage.
Yeah.
So the first day I didn't notice any male children, but the second day this male child was just allowed to run, and I did not. I felt so uncomfortable. But of course, it's a situation can you step in then? I think now that I've thought about it, if I do see something like that happening again in the future, I will step in and stop the little boy. Mm-hmm. And, try to find his mother. Yes. Because, what about this? Why is this space not a safe space for a little girl? Of all the places in the world, a feminist, place should be a place where a 3-year-old or younger girl is not being sexually harassed by a little boy. And
yet, it's usually the least likely safe space for girls.
That is so horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah.
I don't know. It's a depressing topic, but I'm glad to talk about it because,
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing is the idea that you're selfish if you don't reproduce. Ellen DeGeneres got that as soon as she came out. Are you going to have a baby? And she said, I'm too selfish.
Yeah, well, that has shut down any conversation to encourage her to talk about it more. Yeah. It's you have to admit, you're selfish or something.
Yeah, I know.
First off, what does that matter?
Right.
Why can't a woman be selfish about her own life? That's a good thing. Most women aren't.
But it is selfish to reproduce. Who's it helping? Yeah, isn't it amazing that they don't even think to question it?
It's a reversal. It's is it selfish in one way to not have children? Sure. It's I'm going to prioritize my own things I want to do as opposed to what everyone else wants me to do.
But why is the assumption that you should have children to even think that it's selfish to not?
Yeah. And how is it not selfish to have children when, you're going to be, consuming a lot more resources, you're going to be, contributing to, and you're going to be imposing, life on another human being.
I know.
In a world that is, as we've already said, not ideal. Yeah. And possibly a little girl. You're going to have her be born into this situation. Yeah. I think, that is it is a very selfish act, as well. So it's just a conversation that shouldn't even be leveled at the child free. It's so not. Right. It's not fair, or it doesn't matter. Who could be more selfish than people just blindly going along with the conformity thing? I think that's another thing. This whole issue, and I don't know if it's just that it hasn't been discussed enough, but you get privilege for conforming. So regardless of what it is, if you conform to the expectation that society has for you, you will be treated better than if you stand out and say, no, I'm not going to do that. So heterosexuality, femininity, motherhood as part of all of that. there are certain status and privilege you get for conforming that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you don't conform, you will be looked at as an odd one, if not treated
Yes.
very differently. So
Yeah.
it's like this kind of concept. It's just, it goes over women's heads, and I don't know if it's just like, I worry that a lot of it is that women are just so dissatisfied with their own lives, and they're so unhappy that they don't want the feminist spaces that they have online to in any way challenge, you know, what's going on with them, or like kind of push them out, because really what they want is just to vent and be unhappy somewhere.
And keep their privilege so they can, I mean, unless they're challenged, boss other women around because they're not mothers. I mean, some of the horrible things that get said, it's unbelievable. So why do they want to give that up? It's like a lot of them don't want to give up their other privileges either.
Yeah.
And they want to exert them. They don't care if they hurt anybody. But, yeah, I mean, in this area, there's so many people. I mean, the population is at least doubled, more than that. I mean, when I see these people with their kids, I just think, and there's so many privileged here, I'm just like, haven't we been here long enough? Can't we move into the nice houses now and move you people out who got the houses because of family contacts or class privilege? Do we still have to keep living in this terrible poverty and friends being driven out? They don't know where the hell they're going to live because the rents are phenomenal compared to what they used to be. That's why we don't have a lesbian community. In the old days, somebody would rent a big house for $100, $200. There'd be lesbians living there. They'd have parties, dances, and now you're lucky to rent a room that's not $1,000, $1,500, $2,000.
Yeah.
In a crappy house.